Stay tuned for this episode of Texas Whiskey.
What Netflix shows do you watch?
It's his life.
Jimmy.
Hey, Nico, I'm going to do a show here. Can I introduce you?
Hi.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Texas Whiskey. My name is Jimmy Hayes Nelson, a.k.a. Coach Jimmy. I'm here as always with the doctor, Dr. Nico Martini.
Cheers, sir.
And we are talking today to Mr. Marcus Kyprios from Blackland Distillery. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on here.
Of course.
Before I started all of this, I was a lawyer. And one time I went on Nancy Grace in New York, and I feel like this is going to be very similar to that.
Hard hitting
between both of you. Yeah.
Right. Do we give off that same Nancy Grace vibe?
Yeah, I mean, I was scared of her, and I'm probably scared of both of you as well.
Awesome. Well, let's drink to that. Speaking of Nico, what are we sipping on here to start with?
We are starting off as we always do. This is a Blackland Rye 100. And Marcus, if you could do us the honors of telling us what exactly is in this glass.
So we opened the distillery in 2018, and we started distribution in 2019. So while we are cooking and fermenting and distilling our straight bourbon and rye, which we haven't released yet, which will come out next year. Very exciting. Good preview.
Nice.
We currently do a blend. And so this blend in particular for a rye is 100% malted rye from Minnesota. And then we blend that 80-20, the 20% being our young rye that we make at the distillery. And so that mash bill is 80% rye and 20% triticale, which is a grain grown in North Texas. It's a cross-pollinate. Not a lot of people are using it. I like it so much that we're barreling it at 100%, and we're just going to call it Blackland whiskey whenever that's ready.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that'll be different.
And that's a grain? That's a word that I haven't heard pop up in as many shows as we've done so far. So I was like, hey, new word.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to engineer it because it's two male grains. Like the wheat, it's a cross-pollinate of wheat and rye.
Very cool.
The spiciness of the rye is cut into a little bit by the creaminess of the wheat. There's a distillery in Spokane doing it called Dry Fly that I like a lot. That's really the only people I ever see ever talk about triticale. So
Triticale. Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
There was a funny story. I think it was Alamo Distilling down in San Antonio. Yeah. They the master distiller, I forget Rick. I think his name's Rick. Rick was telling me about how there was one day he had the day off or something, and he wasn't even supposed to be there, and then he wound up showing up, and he gets it in. They're dumping grain, and he walks over and he's like, "What is this?" And they're like, "This is the boss. This is the grain you told us to dump." And he's like, "No, literally, I have no idea what this is." Right. And he called, and they sent him triticale.
Yes.
And he's like, well, it's dumped, so I guess we're gonna distill this and see what happens. And like he's just kind of like, "Yeah, man, I don't know. It's in a barrel. We'll see what happens." Like, what he's like, it worked.
So it's like the ultimate happy accident.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes that's how you stumble upon like really unique things.
I think and I mean, other than Dry Fly, the only other one that I've heard messing with it at all is Bent. I know. Bent
oh, really?
Bent is doing some stuff with
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
I like the grain. I like that it's a differentiator, but there's so many grains. I mean, when someone says, "Oh, you have to use corn for bourbon," there are so many different types of corn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And even the slight variations can affect the flavor at the end of the day substantially.
I mean, it's the reason that Texas whiskey doesn't taste like Kentucky whiskey, because we don't use commodity corn here. Everybody's on their heirloom shit.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we appreciate you being here. And like
Can
I said,
cuss on the radio? Is this?
I was going to ask that
too.
Okay. Yeah, so. Is that allowed?
Well, fuck it, whatever.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Are there a lot of people ponying up to the radio or their podcast with their kids to talk about the whiskey show?
Should you have to be 21 to listen to the show anyway?
Or at least 16.
Something? We need an age gate.
Do we to get into that? I don't know. I remember the very first show we did. So the way this whole thing started was, Nico and I know each other 20 years or whatever. He's the whiskey expert. I'm just, hey, dude, I just like to drink this stuff. So can I just come do the show to learn?
Sure.
And early on, we were very careful about, I guess this is professional. And we're in this amazing vocal studio and we shouldn't cuss. And still, for the record, you were the first person to slip. It wasn't me.
When?
The
Just
first
now?
cuss word. No. Just in the history of this show. But it is funny as the show's gone along. It's been like, we are drinking, so But I want to go back. So as I'm doing some research and looking at this, and we were talking just briefly before the show started. And as I put in the intro, you don't have the normal story to distiller. So can you take us back a little bit and maybe connect some dots from lawyer to chef to doing this?
Sure. Although, like, I always go around the more distillers I meet too, no one comes from there is no distiller career
I
guide,
guess there
right?
is no
Yes.
8-year-old kid instead of a fire truck. Like you have little barrels and you're
That's
like, what do
right.
you want to be, Billy, when you grow up? I'm going to distill whiskey, So maybe that's who's
If you
watching
go-
the show now, Nico.
If you now go to TexasWhiskeyBook.com, I'm selling toys that are made with tiny little plastic people.
That's
in barrels,
perfect.
pushing
Awesome.
them around. Yeah. No, there's lots of ex-lawyers. The thing that intrigues me, that's always intrigued me about you, is the chef thing. So like, you will see lots.
And I feel like
of,
we find lots of engineers
yes
too, as we've talked to a lot of people.
That makes sense coming from like the production.
Yeah, the science side and whatnot.
So yeah, I would say that. I think, and on that note, like I always talk about, there's a really delicate balance between the art and the science, right? And so yeah, you do have a lot of engineers, and I'm so thankful for everything I've done because it's all really a culmination of my life to this point. So yes, I was a lawyer, and then at night I went to culinary school, and then after culinary school I got into wine, and part of the sommelier exam is distilled spirits, and so then I went to a number of schools around the country to learn actually how to make alcohol. There are distilled spirit schools.
Wow.
And then I saw it was very much like cooking in that you are cooking grain if you're doing it the right way. And you are fermenting it and you are distilling it, and then you're either imparting flavor or adding botanicals or filtering this, depending on what you're making. And so that is sort of the approach that I have in terms of a culinary point of view in making all of these spirits. Whereas, there are a lot of home brewers, or there are a lot of engineers, there are some lawyers. But again, when you're making all of this and you're making your cuts, or you're distilling and you're fermenting, all of this is for one purpose only, and that is, what is it going to taste like in the bottle? Does it taste good? Right. And so you have to balance that. And so I'm really happy with our stuff. I'm really happy with our vodka and our gin, our blended whiskeys now, but our straight whiskeys, I'm really excited about what we're doing. And so far, so good.
Okay, so I always have to ask, when people make these giant career leaps, what are the people around you at the time as you're making these shifts from lawyer to moonlighting as a chef to eventually just walking away from all that? And obviously you made a right choice. So what you guys are doing and just the accolades you're getting is amazing. But what was that first, like, was there hiccups along the way of just kind of getting things up, whether it was getting people on board or some people just going, why are you doing this? Or was there always support?
Oh no, I have good like family support, but yes, people around me are like, what the hell are you doing? Also, like, this is a really difficult business. Besides the fact that there's just so much competition, because there's no college or really like, there's not a lot. You can't just go get a lot of experience and work in a distillery, because even if you can on the production floor, the operational part and the marketing and the tasting room and everything that's involved, you have to live, you just have to experience that in life, right? You have to just go with it and learn it, and you are learning stuff every day. And so like in the 3 years that I've opened this and operated it and gone out into the world, I feel like I've learned 30 years worth of information, right? And so again, it is a culmination of everything. If you go to one of these schools, there are a bunch of people who may be like, I've distilled, I can make vodka, or I can do this, but they're afraid of the legal aspects of it, like the TTB and the TBC and how to get through the administrative process. Or maybe you have a lawyer like me who's not as concerned about that, but is concerned about the opening the tasting room or something like that. So all of that together, you're going to have strengths and weaknesses. And so, yeah, it's been crazy, but it just all has made sense.
Awesome.
Did you have any? Do you have any partners? Do you have any like? Is it primarily you?
Yeah, it's me.
It's just you.
That's the craziest
That's what I
part about
thought.
this whole thing. It's like, it's me.
It's just you.
But now I'm getting to the point where we're scaling and growing it, where I'm going to have to like open that and then go down that, because you do as you just increase volume, right?
Yeah. No, of course.
Yeah, but that's okay. Now I have the proof of concept and the sales and the established brand, et cetera, et cetera. And you'd much rather be in that place, I think, than do a proof of concept startup. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your experience been? Obviously we talk, primarily about Texas whiskey on this show, and we talk about kind of how what I see a whole lot of as kind of the new guy to this and learning what's going on is this real collaborative effort between all these other distillers. I mean, obviously there is some competition in there, but it does seem like everybody wants everybody to win for the greater good of like Texas whiskey. What's your experience as being a newer guy on the block, obviously, with people that were established and kind of coming in? Was it, I was just kind of curious what that experience was like.
Yeah. Mine was interesting. Like there are a lot of distilleries I get along with and that I like, and there are a lot of people who are like, yes, let me help you and and you help me. And then there are distilleries that are very protective and secretive. And by the way, I understand that.
Yeah,
and
of course.
If you don't want to get out there and talk to me about things or vice versa, I'm fine with that. So I obviously gravitate towards those places that are open, and there are a lot of good ones. And also, like for me, at the end of the day, I care about are you making great stuff? And then that's who I want to talk to.
Absolutely.
A big part of our success has been that there's a lot of mediocre alcohol. And I'm not saying Texas out. I'm just saying across
in general,
the board.
right?
Yes. And so if you make some good stuff, then it really does stand out, and that's who you want to hang out with and talk to and bounce ideas.
Isn't that funny? Because I feel like sometimes people talk about competition, but if you set a standard and you set yourself, that really the competition, you don't really worry about that because you can't help but stand out because people talk about, I was listening to another interview with you where you were describing it as ultra premium and quality. And I feel like as someone who's sitting here in a suit. Yeah, I like, and then I want to talk about this tasting room in a second. Speaking of that, because it's the first place I've seen, I'm like, that looks like a bar I would go to. It doesn't look like what we normally go taste things in, Nico. I'm like, this looks bougie like me. It looks awesome.
The front office of a warehouse.
Right. And I don't see sawdust on the floor. Like I could go to your tasting room in my suit, and I'm very, very looking forward to that part. But I guess what I was saying is when you do raise the bar, it's cool because I feel like the more quality people are, there isn't this scarcity mindset. It's like, dude, I'm doing high level shit. You're doing high level shit. We can, collaborate. And there's not this, you're stealing from me, I'm stealing from you. It's everybody raising the bar together. So that's awesome that you say that.
Yeah. And I just think too, like on that point, Texas spirits and especially whiskey is very young, and it's gotten better every year, I think, just generally as a whole. And it's only going to get better as it becomes its own giant thing, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to raise the bar, or you're going to get left behind.
Well, I've heard Nico say it over and over and over again. We were down at the Texas Whiskey Festival, and I think that was the first time I really got this sense of the collaboration and watching people from that were doing amazing things, sitting and watching them talk and be in really openly with each other. But Nico and so many other people, you guys kept saying, this is the year. Obviously there's been so much success, but it was like, I just kept hearing from everybody, like we always kind of talk about the hockey stick when it comes to momentum, that I feel like everyone keeps circling, like this is that time when we look back that it all kind of takes off. Do you feel like you've seen that same kind of growth?
Is it the year?
I don't know if this is the year, but I know we're going that way because there's a fascination, especially outside of Texas, there's a fascination with the state. And some people think that's terrible and some people think that's great. But I get contacted all the time by so many random people in terms of Asia who are like,
really?
I want a Texas whiskey. Can we import this Texas whiskey?
There's some dude in the Netherlands who's really, really sad that I couldn't send him Grace. And I'm like, I don't even know how that happened. How to work that, man. I can send you a book.
And the Netherlands is where like, you're looking on a map. You're like, right, yeah.
Yeah, man.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I just think good or bad, that's sort of like there's no such thing as bad publicity. Like the world is always watching us, this state somewhere, and a lot of people like in Kentucky don't like Texas whiskey, and they'll say a lot of bad things about it.
Right.
But I always say too, and I haven't really talked to Nico about this, but Texas whiskey is so very different than Kentucky whiskey, especially in the bourbon world.
Sure.
So you can say when people say this doesn't taste like Kentucky bourbon, I say it's not supposed to taste like Kentucky bourbon. Right. So I'm happy as long as it's good. It's not like wine where you can't not make it here in Texas, right? No disrespect to all the Texas wineries, but the climate is good for us. We can make really cool whiskeys that are different.
Well, we do compare, this analogy's come up a few times on the show, is we do compare it to wine a bit about if you're drinking a big Bordeaux from France and all of a sudden you open something from Argentina, you're like, well, this is different. We're like, of course it is.
It is.
You're in a completely different place. And I feel like as we continue to try to educate people on the show, it's exactly what you said is it's not Kentucky. It's not trying to be Kentucky. And I think that's why there is so much success, because those of you that are on the forefront of this is, what do we do well here? What's the climate like? What are the grains that work here? Yeah. And it is different.
That's the thing that like I get the most out of the Texas distillers and the Texas whiskey makers is I feel like everybody's maybe when I say this is the year, maybe what I mean by that is this is the year that they finally switched to Texas doesn't taste like anything else.
Right.
And that's ultimately like it was going to get there eventually because it doesn't.
Yeah. Right.
And so, but like maybe this is the year that everybody's kind of like, look, it's our own thing.
Right.
It's its own deal. And if you don't like it, that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally fine. There's plenty of bourbon. There's plenty of Tennessee whiskey. There's plenty of great things happening in Spokane.
Right.
Go check them out.
Right.
But our flavor profiles are because of where we are.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be different because you're not here.
Speaking of tasting different, let's can we go through what all is these beautiful looking bottles are here and kind of what all we brought or what's staring at us?
Easily the prettiest bottle. Like,
it's gorgeous.
I love this bottle so much. I want to like I have this idea of like taking the bottles and making like a chandelier out of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
and
you already have one.
yeah, well, people have done that too. We're gonna do like a
You relate to the party, dude.
yeah.
That was 3 years
It's
ago.
on Etsy already. Yeah.
Everyone comes in and they say, I don't want to throw the bottles away. And then they'll do something cool with them and they bring it in to show me.
You're like,
right?
there's a glass shortage. Just bring them back.
Right. We will reuse them. Right.
I'm not even going to talk about that. But we're going to have some contest at the end of the year where we can say who can be the most creative with
I love
the bottle
that.
afterwards.
That's
right?
cool.
But yeah, the bottle is the brand. The bottle like really stands out. Everyone comes into the distillery and they say, Marcus, I bought this spirit because the bottle was cool and then I liked what was inside.
Yeah.
And so it's our best salesperson. It's easily recognizable. I would say 80 to 90% of bottles are stock bottles that if you really go look at the liquor store and it's got like maybe a different spray or maybe like a cool label on it. But we put an upfront expense to get those bottles, and I think it's really paid off for us early on.
Yeah. It really has this timeless look to it
Yes.
as well. And I think that's what I know the things that I gravitate towards is timeless over trendy and things like, yeah, you could see that bottle in any era on, on a liquor shelf. And so for me, that
100%.
really appeals to me. And so I stopped at a liquor store on the way here and grabbed this one but it was like a shining beacon off the shelf. And I was like, damn it, that's a pretty bottle.
Oh,
So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dude, you're a little madman.
Yes, my Mad Men fantasy, this bottle works very
in your
well.
Mad Men
Yes.
fantasy, I can see the entire back bar just
It's
being
just-
variations
yes.
of this bottle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Jimmy's Bar brought to you by Blackland. Yes, I can see that very much. So I need to know more about what you have in your hand right there because it was the hot topic as before we started.
Yeah, I get. Let's start from the run. Let's run through the products. Like what
Don't start with that one.
Let's run through the products
All right.
because then at the end I'm going to say, and what's your best seller? And then we'll talk.
And then we'll go there. Okay, I'm more. Okay.
Yeah, so we make. I think we're a little bit different compared to other distilleries in that we make and distribute 5 spirits. So when you think of Tito's or Deep Eddy or TX or Rebecca Creek or Garrison or Balcones, they're primarily focused on one, and maybe they have some flavors or variation of one. But we are trying to hit different market segments, right? Different customer bases. So we make a vodka, we make a gin, we make a bourbon, we make a rye whiskey, and then we make a Texas pecan brown sugar bourbon. And the people that are drinking those are often very different. And where we sell those well are often very different. So for instance, we sell a ton of vodka and bourbon in liquor stores, but on the on-premise, which is bars and restaurants, especially at cocktail bars, the gin and the rye do very well.
Gotcha.
And it's great. And if there was one that was lagging behind, I would stop making it. Maybe I would stop making it because I like all of them and I'm passionate about all of them. And then you have the outlier for me, which is the pecan, because not only does that sell well in the liquor stores, it sells really well in bars and restaurants. And
is this your biggest seller?
it's absolutely my biggest seller. It's not even close.
The thing that I love about truthfully, other than the flavor, the thing that I love the most about this whiskey was Marcus's just the pain in his face every time I brought it up, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm writing a whiskey book," and he's like, "I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna put the pecan in." He's like, okay. I'm like, why? I mean, it's your best seller.
Is it one of these things where, because I feel like every distillery kind of has a thing where what I call like their threshold product, where like somebody is introduced to them by that product. And is it the fact that most people, do you feel like that's their first introduction to you guys?
Well, it's becoming that way because we've been able to reach out to some shelves we weren't on before. But the catalyst or derivation of this is simply that I would go to a bunch of liquor stores to do tastings of my first 4 spirits. And then I would watch people walk in and buy Screwball and buy Fireball and buy Crown Apple. And finally I was like, well, the world loves sugar whiskey, even though for me, all of these things have a very artificial taste to it.
But it's so good.
And I'm gonna back up because this literally is the first time I've ever heard that term, sugar whiskey.
Yeah,
So give me like a definition.
So it's whiskey with what I like to call a high amount of sugar. In this case, this is an ungodly amount of sugar.
That's just a cocktail in the bottle.
It is.
It
It
needs to be cut if you want a cocktail. It's real. Like there's a lot going on.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. But this is just my initial first gut react. This is my first time ever experiencing this.
Totally.
And you know me, I've become someone who will sip whiskey neat because of you in this show.
Yes.
But I am cocktail dude. And that's brilliant. So I understand why people that are wanting something that's probably, there's a lot going on there, but it's not as intimidating to certain people all day long. Like I can really understand what the popularity of it.
Yeah, I think it's an accessible, what some people come up to me and say, oh, I can't drink whiskey, especially women. I can't drink whiskey, but I like that. And it makes it a little bit more accessible to them. And let me just say this, like, even though I don't personally drink it because I find it a little too sweet, it's a good sugar whiskey. It's a very good sugar whiskey. We tried to elevate like we've tried to do everything else with our brand. Sure. And I think that's where the popularity lies, right? Yeah. Because there's no cinnamon and there's no fake artificial flavors in there, right?
It's also the type that, I mean, just the Texas pecan brown sugar, like that combination is on point.
Right.
You can't be off point with that combination. And then B, it's not cinnamon, it's not honey, it's not these sort of generic go-tos that every big whiskey out there's got a honey.
Yep.
Right.
All of them, they all have a honey.
You're right.
Okay, cool. How about you not do a honey? Like what's and it's local. It's you're bringing in the conversation about about Texas, and there's a lot of different layers to it, and it's really tasty.
Where do you feel like this is? So again, just educating myself.
Yeah.
What do you feel like the difference between? So there are distilleries that do like a bottled old fashioned or a bottled, and so we've talked about some of them here on the show.
Right.
What do you feel like the difference between something like that is and something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I see really more with the popularity is canned cocktails right now. That's a big thing. This in and of itself to me is still a spirit that a lot of people are enjoying on ice or at college bars shooting.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Which I
Dude, we used to shoot Rumpelmints. I mean,
right. This isn't Rumple. That's what I'm talking. This isn't Goldschlager.
Right,
this is amazing. I still have like right now. I just had a shiver down my spine thinking of both of those. This is amazing. And so I guess I thought somebody like a Treaty Oak has a bottled old fashioned or something. So I was just curious if you considered that in the same category. If you thought it was kind of its own a little bit different.
This thing is so diverse because you can shoot it or you can put it on ice, but Nico and I were talking, we have this great salted pecan old fashioned where you cut it with some rye and use just the sugar instead of the simple syrup in that with some walnut bitters and some salt or saline. And that's its own cocktail. And we've done like a pecan bourbon pina colada by the pool, which is really good. So it's diverse. It's a sugar whiskey. People put it in their coffee and their eggnog and their hot chocolate.
Oh, I bet that is brilliant eggnog.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for Christmas all of a sudden. In July, as we sit here, I'm already thinking about Christmas and some eggnog.
That killed it last Christmas, and I expect it to do twice as well this year.
what's the proof?
Oh, that's another thing. So it's 70 proof, which for a liqueur is a little bit higher than some of these others. Although there are some, but just generally, it's a pretty high proof.
I feel like the majority of like the bottle cocktails that I've seen are between 50 and 60.
Are they?
Yeah.
As far as proof
Gotcha.
goes. So it's closer to a whiskey than it is a bottled.
I think you can taste a whiskey in here.
Have you thought about doing taking this and doing canned old fashions or anything or?
Yeah, I've thought about it, but I don't want to do it.
Cool.
I just always feel it just feels like that seems like something. I just talking out of ignorance, but I would just think that feels like going back to the quality comment.
Right.
That's the hardest part with something like that is to keep the standard that you want your product to be associated with when you're sticking it in a canned cocktail or something, I would think.
Yeah, you're right. And it really goes back to the overall brand, and you don't want to water it down.
Sure.
So whether it's the bottle, the label, and the product you're putting inside, it has to be up to a certain standard. Yeah. So you have to keep that first and foremost.
Yeah. You don't necessarily need to see your brand thrown into a cooler in the back of you know. So I get that.
Speaking of branding and marketing and stuff, I know that you guys. I keep. So I listened to the ticket religiously, and I know that you guys were one of the primary sponsors of the Byron
Colonial.
The Colonial.
Yes.
How'd that go?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Really, really fun. I'm trying to do that again next year. It was just. Very cool for just exposure purposes and brand awareness. And that's a major professional tournament, right?
Yeah,
So,
totally.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Was that your first foray into a big sponsorship like something like that?
Yeah, we've tried to do some things but it's, it's all baby steps, and it just is really expensive from like the Mavericks or the Stars.
Sure, yeah.
You want to support the local stuff in DFW because we're from DFW. But it takes time.
Well, yeah, and Nico and I talked about this a long time ago. I remember maybe it was a Cowboys game or something. We were talking about, gosh, wouldn't it be great if you could get a killer old fashioned or even something like the Sugar Whiskey, something like, as someone who doesn't really, I love sporting events, but I don't go crack a beer when I'm at a sporting event, and so I would love the opportunity, so it's cool that, whether it was, the Colonial or something, I feel like we're heading that direction where hopefully the future of live sports, you also see quality spirits that you can get as well. Yeah. Yeah. Especially local, because we, with all the sports teams locally, so.
You just have to be careful because, like, to your point, I know some other distilleries who have done deals, and like for baseball, that's really tough because that's such a beer dominated place. And so you want to be careful about, is this a venue? Because it is a marketing play, but you also want people to enjoy your stuff while they're there. And you have to think about who's drinking, who's my audience here, are they into this type of thing? So, yeah, we've done also a lot like with Texas Motorplex out in Ennis.
Oh, yeah?
Nice.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. It's been, and they've been great. And
see, I always think like something like whether it's like horse racing and stuff. Like I think of where knowing your audience and who, what's the sport, who's the audience, what's being attracted there. I never really thought of that until just now, but that's super key. And
I mean, as soon as I make a weed whiskey, we are totally throwing a disc golf tournament. Like, like 100%.
Okay, so talking about marketing and branding, I have not been out to visit. It is on my short list of things to do. But the first time I saw the pictures of your tasting room, I just stopped because, like I said, I'm new to this world. I'm just following Nico along. We're going down the hill country. We're going to, in fact, we went to the festival, right? And I wear this.
Oh, nice.
At the festival. Part of it's because it's the bit, and part of it's because I'm super extra. So I get that. And I've always said, look, there's whiskey. There's different whiskey drinkers out there. I am not the lumberjack guy with the big beard and like a lot of the whiskey drinkers. I drink my whiskey dressed like this. So all of a sudden I was like, these are my people.
Yes,
I was like, I saw you tasting room.
Yes.
So just take me down. Like what was the decision process to do a tasting room that looked gorgeous?
Yeah, so let me just say I can relate to that too, right? Because I love the Texas Whiskey Trail, which we're on, but one day you can be in like a barn in the middle of nowhere, and then the next day you can come to our tasting room and you go and you think to yourself, this is the same industry, these people are making the same thing, why is it so different? But that's the greatness of the diversity of Texas whiskey too, like across the board.
Yeah.
So we're not just to come in and do a tasting flight, right? Because we make 5 spirits, and we make our bitters and we make our liqueurs because we have to as a distillery. We've cultivated a really cool cocktail menu around that. And so my thought just was, let's make the best cocktail lounge we can and make it an experience, because the tasting room is really marketing for your product so that people will come in and have a great cocktail and then leave and go out and buy you in the liquor store and buy you at bars and restaurants, right?
Well, it looks like a place you'd want to sit and just hang out at. It's not like, I'm just tasting this and then moving on. Like gonna enjoy this experience.
So we're reservation only Friday, Saturday night, and it is a great place to come have a drink before or after dinner. And I don't know a lot of like distillery tasting rooms that are like that in terms of if you want to see, you have to make a reservation before you, you go, like, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
That's awesome for us. Like I'm really proud of that, and I love the tasting room, and I love how popular it's become, and it's great too for just our interactions with people because they know us and bring a lot of people in.
Do you have regulars at the tasting room?
Oh yes,
Of course you do. That's I mean, again, looking at that, I'm like, that's somebody's neighborhood bar, and that's awesome.
But can I say, like, the regulars that we have, like, I really like. And
That's even better, right?
They're 30 and up and
Yeah.
sophisticated. And
But it's knowing your audience. It's knowing
Sure.
who you want. Yes.
yes.
Rolling in there in a Don Draper suit.
Dude, I'm
Yes.
I'm going to call an alto first or a lift or something and get out there because I have a feeling once I stop in, I don't need to drive back to this side of town. But
Was it last year, y'all? Was it the Weekly or the Star Telegram? You won Best Bar.
That was Tastemaker Culture Map Bar
Straight
of the
up
Year
best
2020.
bar of the year.
I know.
That's
that-
cool.
A freaking tasting room.
But that's
right.
but that's also rare. I
awesome.
don't know any other tasting rooms that have like a cocktail program.
Yeah,
Usually it's just
Right.
here's your little flight sample and grab a bottle and leave or whatever, so
Yeah, you're right. There's not. Although, conversely, I'm really proud of that award because we don't serve beer or wine. We only
Right.
serve cocktails, and we beat out a lot of the bars that I like in Fort
Yeah.
Worth too. So, again, I think that's just a testament to how awesome the cocktail program is and what a neat experience it is. And yeah,
It's such a great room. God, I love that room so much.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
let's just go get some B-roll and just tell me when
Yes,
we're going.
Jimmy,
And
Jimmy,
yes,
we will go
Sorry.
to Blackland.
You have
I
a-
promise you, we'll go to.
And what are you opening? Is this the bourbon there? Is that the
Yes, I
is
poured
that
some
the-
bourbon,
which is
because
what I got today and haven't opened.
while
yet,
the
so.
Texas pecan is delicious,
Yes.
it's also very sweet.
It
I
is.
wanted something that wasn't that sweet, so so now I'm sipping on the bourbon. What is your?
Do you mind passing that this direction?
Your 80-20
yes.
mash bills
Yes.
just across the board.
Yep. It's so easy for us. So on this, this is a really easy sipping bourbon is what I call it.
Thank you.
If there's a criticism, it's the not an aggressive in your face bourbon, but it makes us accessible to a lot more people, I think,
Right.
on this blend.
And what's the proof on this bourbon?
83, just like our,
Yeah, nice.
we do make 100 proof, both bourbon and rye.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, but it's just a nice, easy sipping
Absolutely.
bourbon.
Whiskey.
You can see why that's our next bestseller behind the Texas Pecan.
Yes, I understand.
And this is Bourbon Country. I mean, it's Texas. That's
Yeah.
what people drink and think they should be drinking, and that's fine. And that's what I make, and that's great.
That's awesome.
Do you have you done any? Have you had any considerations of doing like cast strength stuff? Are you thinking any high proof stuff coming down the pike at all? Or
So, we taste our barrels like quarterly and grade them.
yeah,
And, we proof it at between like 117 and 120 proof. Like that's cast proof.
yeah.
And it's not for me. I know there's a segmented audience that loves it.
Yeah.
But it's just so small. And like, then I have to market it and then I have to distribute it. And that's a long answer of no, I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
But I feel like that also goes back to like, what do you you want to make what you want to drink?
Yeah.
Which
and
makes sense.
That's
you know?
right. That's what that was the original for. And then I stepped out of that with the pecan, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I can sit here and tell you, no, I'm not going to do it. And then in a few months, you'll probably see it on the shelf.
Here comes
somewhere.
cast strength.
Yeah.
Cast strength.
Well,
Blackland.
Like Marcus didn't say that. Like there it is. Right.
That is also the beauty of the tasting room is that it is a lab and an
Oh, I'm
experiment
sure.
for us. Where when we made the pecan, we debuted it in there, and that was we've got to put this out into distribution, right?
What was the origin in even trying that?
Well, again, it was my I'm going to make a sugar whiskey that's better than every other sugar whiskey, and it was around the holidays. But the flavor profiles.
So you
are
just saw a market that was popular. You just felt like
Yes.
somebody wasn't doing a quality version of something
Yes,
people were liking.
I mean, I do not drink Fireball or Screwball.
Right.
I look down upon those
Yeah.
without any.
Like, can you serve that audience but give them something quality?
Correct.
That's
Yes.
that's brilliant. It's so
Yes.
good when you find a gap in the marketplace and you're like, okay, people are doing this. We kind of roll our eyes at them. What if we gave them something actually really good?
Right.
Yes.
I'm sitting here racking my brain, and I think. What is it? The Silver Star. They've got a honey. Other than that, I don't know if there's sugar whiskey coming, like actual, not Jamie Foxx crap. That's actually coming out of Texas. I don't know if there is one.
I
No,
saw,
that's why I was asking before. The difference between this
the closest thing
as
would
like
be
an
the
old fashioned. Yeah.
The
So
closest thing would be that Treaty Oak Old Fashioned. But like, yeah, no, I think it's entirely unique.
yeah, I agree.
That's awesome.
Yes, and there is a large customer base category for that.
Dude, they're going to buy it.
Right.
I mean, you might as well make a good version of it.
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
I
And
love
so the
that.
flavor profiles were that was more of my culinary background, knowing that pecan is very popular here. I wanted to do something with pecan.
Yeah.
And it was the
And it's very
holidays,
Texan.
And very
Yeah.
Texas.
So, yeah.
And then the brown sugar just made sense with the bourbon. There's a book called The Flavor Bible. So if you just have an ingredient, you can go and look at the other ingredients that correlate with those or that pair well, right? And so that was an easy one where you just go, okay, if I want pecan, is there bourbon there? Yeah. What else? Oh, that looks good. Brown sugar. And there's some other ones on there. So it's like a guide.
nice.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pecan pie in a bottle.
Yeah.
It's-
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole vibe of it.
Yeah.
So what's on the horizon as far as what you're excited about? Like,
Hold up, I have a real technical question.
oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah.
I wanted to know how exactly you, in the making of all of this stuff, how did you figure out where you were going to decide to? I was trying for a joke. I'm just going to go into it. Tell us about your robot whiskey, because you use an ice still, which is completely unique to anybody in Texas.
Yes.
So tell everyone what an ice still is. I was going to be like, hey, how do you figure out your cuts?
Gotcha.
Be like, well, I punch in a number.
Yeah. No,
this is good. So
I
this is actually how it's made. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's right. So the iStill is what I like to call state-of-the-art technology. It's fully automated, and really for the novice person at home. So when you're making ethanol, what you're trying to do is really separate the bad ethanol from the good ethanol, okay, at the end of the day. And so you have these heads, hearts, and tails. And so in the whiskeys, you're making these cuts and separating those out. The hearts are the pure ethanol, that, you know, the base, that you will. And then especially on a lot of whiskeys, we have a lot of these esters and congeners in these tails. And where you make that cut, how many of the tails you're keeping in versus keeping out, oftentimes that's where the art comes in, right? And so a lot of distillers do it by feel, or they do it by time, whereas we're doing all of that to the thousandth of a degree of temperature that is fully automated on our computer. So we've already established in our minds, this is what we want our whiskey to taste like initially when we started out, so that we've programmed the cuts in. And what I think is we get a really consistent alcohol. We take the human error out of it because we're making the same cuts every time.
Yeah.
And then I always say, just especially on our vodka and gin, we get a really clean alcohol on the finish because there's no heads in there. We're not trying to make a vodka or gin. We're not trying to be taco. We're not trying to stretch the profit out and give you a headache the next day in a plastic bottle. So that's sort of the technology there, and it's just about how much of that flavor do you want to leave in? How clean do you want it to be? And that's really where the art comes in.
How did you come to the decision to do it that way?
To use the stills?
Yeah, to use
yeah.
the
So
still.
I went around and I was like, okay, am I going to get a Vendome? Am I going to do like this? And I'll tell you, like a big part of it was like, I don't want to wait a year or whatever, 18 months to get this built and shipped over from Germany or Italy.
Right.
And then so I started reading about the iStill, and I flew over to Amsterdam and met with them and saw what they did, and then started talking to some other people in Europe who were really using it and fell in love with it. And there you go.
Are there many other people in Texas that do it this way?
No, I don't. I know of one other iStill in Texas, actually.
Where?
It's Avanac Gin. It's a small distillery in Houston.
Gotcha.
And they make really good gin.
Right on.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. No, robot whiskey, man. It's really cool.
That's awesome. And I've heard you reference that before, but I don't think until just now
You realized what I was
understood
talking about?
exactly what you were talking about. So Marcus, as we kind of wrapping up here, so what, give us what you see as the future of what you guys are doing. Like, what are you most excited about?
When's your stuff releasing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm most excited about our straight stuff that we've been making since 2018. So, like, that's everything that we've done
This whole business is very delayed gratification at times, right? You can't speed this stuff
The
up.
barrier to entry is ridiculous,
Right.
Because you see, tons of breweries around, but whiskey distilleries, it takes a lot of time and a lot of capital to do it right.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm most excited about the straight stuff is like we did this, we took the grain, we cooked it, fermented it, distilled it, put it in barrels and aged it and waited. So absolutely. Like I think it's going to be ready in the fall of 2022.
Okay.
Like we have this summer and one more summer. That's sort of how I've started like
Gotcha.
Evaluating all of these is it needs one more Texas summer or it needs two more Texas summers, right?
Gotcha.
So that's where
Fall of next year. Next year's football season is going to be on, man.
it's very close. It is very close. And you say, oh, that's still a year away, but it's a lot closer than when we first started in 2018.
Oh, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel from there.
Yes, I'm so excited. And then we can, put that out there. And
So what are you releasing? Like, what will those be?
it will definitely be a straight bourbon.
Okay.
Okay. We started the rye too, but I may age that a little bit longer.
Man, you're almost at bottle and bond. Have you thought about?
Now I've thought about it.
About just waiting until you
I may
hit
do
that 4?
I may do it with the rye.
Okay.
And that has to be 4 years?
Has to be 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, made it the same time, like from the anyway, and and then the Triticale, I don't know, like it's going really well. I may just do like a fall straight and then a spring Triticale.
Yeah.
The other thing is like I feel like I have a lot of barrels, but not a lot of barrels. Like you can't make enough whiskey, so that's the other problem of it is. Just because of the demand and the hype for straight Texas whiskey, I think I'm just gonna not have enough.
Yeah,
but that's cool. Just that sentence alone, just the demand of right. And again, we talk about the popularity. Real quick, I just now thought about this. Backing up, you were talking about getting calls from Asia and stuff, and we've talked to other people about how in certain arenas, they gain legitimacy and interest outside of the state more than before they established themselves in the state. Did you guys run into that, or did you find like your core audience here first and then outside of the state?
Yeah, and that's my belief. Like a couple of things. I talked to all of these distilleries and we disagree on a lot of stuff, which I appreciate. Every brand is different.
Sure.
But I believe at the core, you have to start here in your city, win your city, and grow out externally.
Yeah.
And you do it also by you have to win on the on-premise. You have to build the brand at bars and restaurants because that's where people see you. That's where people become familiar with you and taste you, and then it will help liquor store sales. There are a lot of people who are like, I don't want to spend the money because it is costly to get people on the ground to go sell it. I just want to get in as many liquor stores as possible. And that's fine to an extent, but if you really want to grow and build the brand long-term, you've got to get in there and you've got to win your city first. I believe
it's very grassroots, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but now there are a lot of people who have done it the opposite way and who've caught fire, whether that's TX or Tito's, and have gone global or have gone national, right? So that's not my way is not necessarily the only way or the right way for that matter. But that's how we're doing it and that's how we're approaching it. Because you're right, like Texas is huge in Asia. I've gotten a call from Russia before. It's like, I don't want your vodka or your gin, but I really want that Texas whiskey.
Right.
And
I think some of the things that we had talked about, whether it was some kind of national recognition, whether it was an award or something else. And so all of a sudden they're getting calls from like New York or California, and people are, because it's Texas and there's a bit of a, it was unique at the time that they were like, oh, we had people that were more interested in our product outside of the state beforehand. But I completely agree with the way that you would say this is like, let me win my backyard first and let it grow from there.
I mean, dude, I will definitely say from a consumer standpoint, from an observer standpoint, Blackland has taken over Fort Worth. Like, that's all I see. Like all I hear is Blackland as far as Fort Worth goes. And I mean, there's other distilleries there.
Yeah.
And they're, doing stuff and it's interesting and whatever, but Blackland has kind of solidified themselves as Fort Worth whiskey.
Nice.
Which is the way to do it if you want longevity.
And what a great community to like establish yourself in as well. So you
Yeah,
know.
everyone's very supportive.
Yeah.
Right. But everyone's supportive in Texas, period. Like if local is Texas. And
Yeah.
if you're made in Texas, like everyone will support you. Austin sometimes is difficult because they're Austin, and I say that as a Longhorn too. But everywhere else is very supportive. And,
That's ironic.
Yeah. But that's okay.
That's
Very
cool.
Austin.
Man, Marcus, we really appreciate the time. I'm looking forward to coming to said tasting room. Maybe I'll come enough that I get some kind of dedicated corner and I get my own booth in the side. It's like we can't make Jimmy leave. He keeps coming back to hang out here.
I think we're just going to send a camera guy to follow you as you go to.
Oh, please do. Yeah, just watch me be a kid in the candy store.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
be drinking cocktails.
Yes, I'm going to live my Don Draper fantasy thing.
Yeah.
Marcus, thank you so much. You guys should definitely go check out Blackland. Follow this guy over here, Dr. Nico Martini at Texas Whiskey Book on Instagram. I am the Coach Jimmy on Instagram. And as always, cheers y'all.
Cheers, y'all. Hook 'em. Hook 'em.
Oh, that's coming up soon.